I'm thrilled to have Dr. Michelle Crimins here with us today to talk about mental wellness during the coronavirus. So Michelle is a clinical psychologist who specializes in helping individuals navigate important relationships in their lives, especially during times of stress and transition. So she is the perfect person to be talking to today, given we are now on, this will be week 4, I think, of social distancing for us as a city. I know that many of us are feeling feeling that cabin fever, as Governor Cuomo said earlier today. So thank you, Michelle, for joining us. Why don't we just start, we're still waiting for more people to join. So why don't we start by just a brief conversation about, things that are going on right now and what you've been observing, given the social distancing that all of us have been practicing over the last few weeks. Maybe you can talk about the things that you have found to be, driving anxiety and stress for people these days.
Sure. Yes, and thank you for having me. I think that we're all feeling the feelings that come with this very unprecedented time. And it seems to change day to day and week to week, and it's hard to believe we are 4 weeks in. But I think that a big piece of this is how to manage living this way and having, loved ones and just people that we're used to seeing on a daily basis feel so far away right now. And then on top of that, managing schedules. Everyone's in a different, I'm sure everyone who's joining right now has their own unique home life situation. But there's a lot to juggle for many people. And, there are people even steps further who have loved ones who are affected by the illness or who are on the front line. So, I think it's affecting people in many ways in a common way and then very uniquely individually.
What are the ways that you think we can find, I think one of the conversations I had this past week was particularly striking to me. Someone said to me, I'm feeling, this has been great. I've been going out, I've been running, I've been speaking to clients, and, doing as much as I can, but it's really lonely. And, I think for a lot of people that being, the social distancing and requiring to be in your homes 24/7 has, people have lost a lot of the social connections that they used to have. So can you talk a little bit about how we can find connections with other people during this time of social distancing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all of us being here on this call together, right, is a perfect example of needing and wanting. And, I was looking forward to this myself today because while I might have my own inner circle of people I'm in contact with, I don't get to, meet new people and interact with people in the outside world in the same way. So I think that we're really very much feeling this, and thank you all for joining. But I think that it can take a lot of different directions. So I know a lot of people are trying to call people more often than they might have otherwise and, do video sessions. There are wider circles of ways that people can meet. They're doing live concerts right now that you can join into, a lot of live exercise classes, yoga classes. I personally was interested in the shift between, I know you can sort of look online and find a YouTube video of a class. It feels really different when you're, as we are all interacting in real time. It kind of brings us closer together and it feels less isolating. So I think that as the weeks progress, people are getting more creative with how to pull everyone together in this way. But those resources are out there. And I think that, in terms of the actual feelings of loneliness, I think it's important to normalize that because we are all feeling that way. And sometimes when you're feeling lonely, it feels like you might be the only one who feels that way.
That's great. Yeah, I tried a yoga class for the first time a YouTube recording. Not quite the same as being in a studio with other people, but you know, it was a nice way to kind of have some physical activity as well as you know, have a moment of reflection and meditation during this time while my kids were asleep.
Yeah, so you know,
go ahead.
They're doing, some studios will now be offering that at a certain time so that you can actually be doing it with you know, on a screen like this, and you kind of see people in their homes doing it side by side, and that's a nice addition to add in also.
That's great. So I just want to let everyone know, well, first say thank you to everyone who's joined us today. And also, if you would like to ask a question to Michelle, really, you know, we set this up so that all of you could have the opportunity to speak with Michelle today about issues that you may be facing, and would love for you to, you know, go ahead and you can write your name in the Zoom group chat, and Josh, one of my campaign staffers, will go ahead and unmute your line so that you can ask your question. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can go ahead and write your question into the group chat, and we can read it directly off of there. Also, for anyone who's dialing in online by phone, you can dial *9 in order to get your question asked. So, well, I have a question. You know, I'll just throw this out there. You know, I have a fairly, you know, I have a 5-person family. I've got 3 kids and my husband and I, and it feels like we are on top of each other because of how much time we're spending together in the very like limited amount of space in this New York apartment. And also a few weeks ago, I was sick, and so we have been self-quarantining, so we haven't even been going outside. This is probably the most time that I've ever spent with my husband in such a restricted space. So I don't know if I'm the only one feeling this kind of pressure and the stress of being on top of other people that we live with. So maybe could you speak to that a little bit, how to manage relationships in tight quarters?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's an important one. You know, and I also always want to be cognizant of people on all sides of the coin, right? So that might sound really lovely to somebody who's living alone right now and wants that contact. And then when you're in it, you know, so I like to talk about how different people stress. It's very situation dependent and it's real. So on all sides, and we can get to the different sides, but when there's a lot of people in a small space, it's just super tricky. And I think that one of the things that help, and this might be my answer for different questions too, but to have a routine, especially kids, they thrive on routine. And they're pulled out of school now, even the little ones. And so I think that establishing any kind of routine that you can, whether you're by yourself or with larger families, it's super helpful. And but then within that, don't be rigid. Don't, you know, if normally within your routine it goes X, Y, Z, if it we have to be much more flexible than we've ever been within as much structure as we can give ourselves right now. So I think that would be one of my first answers to that question, although I think that your question has a lot of different ways we can go in terms of how to manage the relationships too. Oh, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you.
Sorry, that was me on mute. So we have some questions already coming through on the group chat, so I want to go to those already right away. So the first is from Elliot. I have 2 kids and me and my wife have full-time jobs. Any tips on how to juggle?
Yeah. Hi, Elliot. Great question. It's a lot to juggle. I've noticed, you know, screen time might be much more valued and given an okay than it used to be for kids right now. It's so hard to balance what they need from you and what you guys need to be getting accomplish for work as well. And work stress with everything that's going on is very real at the moment. So I think that it's okay to be a little bit more flexible with what they would generally be allowed to do. But kids need more structure than we realize sometimes. So I think that, too much screen time can make them a little crazy, and too much free reign. But I think that with the kid piece, two things. One is that they look to us to see what our emotions are like, right? So the more frazzled we are, and this is easier said than done, but the more frazzled we are right now, the more it is upsetting to them. And this is a very confusing time and hard to explain. So I think that as much as I like to use the example of putting your own oxygen mask on first, right, in order to help the younger ones or anybody else around you, really to be taking care of what you need to be taking care of first and foremost, and then you can sort of have the resources and energy left for them. And that said, it's a time when I think it's a little bit trial and error, right? As the weeks progress, we see more and more what's working to manage that schedule and what's not. So I would say each day is a learning experience, and you sort of reconfigure it as you go to see what works for your individual family.
And just on the back of that, Michelle, we spoke the other day about this. I think that people, when we consume a lot of media in the house, that it can increase our stress levels, and especially this district in Lower Manhattan, where we've dealt with a lot of trauma over the many years, whether it was 9/11 or whether it was Superstorm Sandy. Can you speak to how, and now when you turn on the TV, it's all about the coronavirus crisis and everything that's happening. Can you speak a little bit to media consumption during this period of time and how it can affect our stress levels?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you raised that. So what we learned from 9/11, unfortunately, having had to learn from it, is that media consumption, and you probably all feel this already, it's too much is not a good thing. For kids especially, it really, really, really needs to be, for them, it should just be turned off, and you should be the filter at which they learn the information that they need to know. And I'm sure that adults, you feel it yourselves. I think it needs to be, I talk with people about when and how they're getting their information. To have it running all day on a loop is just sort of, it breeds anxiety. They're supposed to be hooking you in with fear tactics to some degree, and they want you to watch and worry about what's next. So I think that what I've found talking to different people is sort of having like a one time a day where you check in with news if you need to do that a little bit more for whatever reasons, sure. But starting your day with it and ending your day with it are generally, especially ending your day with it, is not the best idea, because I've been speaking with a lot of people about sleep issues, and this sort of whole time infiltrating dreams, especially, and just problems with sleep. And I think a lot of that has to do with how we kind of take all that information in, especially at the end of the day. But so we really need to limit it and kind of just pick the reputable sources and stick with those. And I think it's important to be informed right now, of course. But we, as you mentioned with 9/11, we saw kids coming out of that with added trauma from just overexposure.
And not just children, adults too.
Absolutely.
We have to be careful about managing that. Yeah, and so on the back of that, Gabrielle had a question. I'm a member of the World Trade Center Health Program, was told that the wait list to talk to a psychologist is months long. How can I seek help from a psychologist to talk through all the stress I'm going through, including difficulty sleeping? So Gabrielle, Josh from my team is going to reach out to you directly to help you off this call to navigate the wait list for a psychologist. We can try and help you do that off this call. But I think it's important to address your second question, which is, talking about stress and difficulty sleeping during this time, on the back of the, what you just commented on.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm glad that you're raising the issue about trying to find help talking to people during this time, because I think it's a time where that's a really good way to manage anxiety and stress about it. And it's so unfortunate that the wait list times are long. I know that there are various groups right now who are trying to implement telehealth care at reduced fees, and I passed some of that information on to Grace. So I'm glad that she's going to, help people individually with that. The sleep and anxiety piece is it's the biggest part of this mental health picture with this traumatic situation. So one thing that we talk about a lot is self-care, and it sounds like a very simple thing that should be easy to execute, and it's often difficult for people, and it's unique to each person for what is comforting for them, for what they need to manage their anxiety. So it can be as simple as what we talked about earlier in terms of a structured routine, having a regular bedtime, eating meals 3 times a day. Like, these things that are our basic needs really need to be our top priority. And just bouncing back to questions from earlier, when there's multiple people in the house, sort of keeping everyone in check for that too. We all know that we get more anxious, more angry, more frustrated, more irritable, and more tired or hungry. So I think that keeping those things top of mind, as silly as it sounds, is super important right now. And when there's so much to do and so much going on for certain families, sometimes we forget how many hours have gone by since we've taken care of some of our basic needs. So sleep, again, sleep is a tricky thing, especially when we are anxious and worried. It very much interferes with our sleep. I really am a big believer in making sure we come back to our breath. People talk about that a lot. It, again, sounds simple and, a little hokey, but really, really making sure we're breathing. What happens when we're anxious is we start to hold our breath. And when we hold our breath, it kind of puts us into more of a fight or flight situation. So people talk about deep breaths, and I like to use the term long breaths, because what you really want to do is to slow your breathing, make sure you're taking longer breaths. And this is something I really like to do before bed, because it puts your body, we have this whole mind-body connection, which is a very, important and obvious connection, but sometimes we split them apart and forget about it. And before bed, when we're tense and tight and our mind is looping, we are not in a state where our body feels that it's ready to go to sleep. But we're, pretty wired, and for a good reason. And again, anxiety has a purpose. And right now we should have a bit of it to sort of manage this situation, right? This is why anxiety exists, is so that we can take care of ourselves when things are, when we need to stay safe. So, but managing it, making sure that it doesn't get over exaggerated, and that it's just the right amount to keep us safe. And then at night, turning it off, going into some deep breaths and relaxing your body so that you can hopefully get a good night's sleep.
Would you recommend any like meditation apps or things like that that could be for people who want to go, practice kind of deep breathing and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I have found Headspace to be a really good introductory app for meditation, as well as people who are more advanced and have done it, kind of brings you back to understanding. He talks a bit about anxiety and understanding how to, acknowledge thoughts without attaching feelings to them, sort of being mindful of the present, and then learning to, gradually meditate longer and longer. It can be very frustrating meditation for a lot of people. So while it comes with tremendous benefits, I think that people should realize that it's not easy, because it can be frustrating. But the benefits are very, very, very huge.
That's great. So Jackson, who's also on the line, she's talking about how she quit vaping a few months ago, but given the situation we're in, especially she's living by herself, she feels tempted to go back. And I think this speaks again to how we manage anxiety and kind of the triggers for us of, behaviorally of the things that help make us feel better. Can you speak to, and for, Jackson, it could be vaping. For others of us, it's maybe a glass of wine at night, but just making sure that we are kind of managing those behaviors as well during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another great question. So I think that we all have our sort of go-to good and bad habits for how we, de-stress, and some of it's, a physical feeling of calm that comes over us, and some of it is sort of an escape. So whether that be vaping or other things, and it's so tricky when we feel like we've got a handle on it, and then something like this happens and increases our anxiety, and it kind of wants to pull us back. So I think that it is a really good time to, of course, first notice what our urge is and where we're pulled, and start to assess. I do a lot of pro-con work with people of immediate gratification and, what it feels like in right after we do something, and then what the long-term consequences are. And so I think it's important to think that through. I also think that it's, even if you go on Pinterest and look up self-care, there's so many, more ideas than we're even talking about here that are things that you can do or try as ways to mediate that anxiety in a different way than we've done before. So if that's even just taking a bath or shower, not to get clean, but to sort of, regulate yourself and kind of get yourself in outside of your current experience, that's something you can do. I know we're talking about loneliness and feeling kind of isolated in terms of not having the people around us physically. So even just massaging your own feet, some of these things sound silly, but that contact it's a different way to refocus what that urge is, generally speaking. So those might be some ideas.
So there's a great question from Annie. She says, I'm with a nonprofit in Lower Manhattan working with high-risk teens across New York City, some of whom don't have great homes to quarantine in, and personal crises for them are increasing. At the same time, our staff is overloaded, juggling homeschooling, working from home, family at risk, and crisis calls from the teens. Would appreciate free resources for the staff and the youth. So, Michelle, if you have any thoughts on some organizations that we could direct Annie to that could address the youth, and then Josh is going to go ahead and put into the chat right now 2 hotlines for people who are seeking mental health resources in New York City. Go ahead, Michelle.
This is a time when our most vulnerable populations are much more at risk. I know that in domestic abuse situations, that's increasing during times of crisis, and our at-risk youth and teens certainly need these resources. So in terms of resources in Lower Manhattan, I think that the ones that Josh is providing are probably would be my go-to ones as well. There are several. In terms of the people who are who need support themselves, who are trying to manage these populations and need support themselves, I have found really good articles for providers on 2 different websites. They're websites that have providers that you can find providers on, and also they have articles and blogs written for either clients or providers themselves. And those 2 resources are Psychology Today. These are websites that are accessible by everyone, not just Lower Manhattan, but they would be Psychology Today and ZenCare. And they have always been in the mental health field and providing articles and resources. And I think that right now they're really trying to target that kind of information to all of the conversations that we're having about either unique populations or just general, mental health, anxiety related issues around the coronavirus. And then, within the populations, especially providers, how to gain help themselves.
Thanks. And Annie, Josh from our team is going to message you directly to get your information, and we can help to provide some more specific resources for you based on what you're looking for. The next question I wanted to go to is from Mercer, who is asking about how face-to-face therapy is like the transition from face-to-face therapy in mental health to online treatment. So can you speak to, that transition now that we're all social distancing, no one can go in and see their therapist, how that gets managed by us specialists like you?
Yeah, it's a tricky time for sure. So what many people at this point have moved over to video telehealth. So it would look very much like what we're doing right now, talking at a video screen. In other cases where people don't have that kind of technology, they're providing phone sessions. It's people who have been in treatment and have a therapist that they've been working with have been able to sort of handle that transition a little more smoothly. I think the tricky thing right now is for people who either were about to seek therapy just for their own lives before this happened, or are now really needing therapy and trying to seek it, and establishing a relationship for the first time in this telehealth way it feels kind of weird and different. We like to be in a room with another person, and even the people that I work with and know me a long time, we've been talking about the fact that while it's better than a phone conversation because we can see each other, there's something about being in a room with another person that it just adds to the therapeuticness of it all, and we're really lacking that right now. But also at the same time feeling so fortunate that we can stay connected in this way that we might not have been able to do in the past. So I think that it's, everything's moving pretty quickly in terms of adjustment. The first, few weeks, it was sort of on an individual basis, and now Psychology Today and Psych Care and these other organizations that I described earlier are all adding that into the platform and helping people connect. There's many people now who are offering reduced fee, very low fee sliding scale, and it'll be advertised as such during this time in order to reach more people that they wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Great. And Joy has a question about how do we speak to younger adults or seniors to convince them that the issues that we're dealing with are serious? Because some people don't feel that, or maybe not taking the health risks as seriously or as urgently as others. And we want to make sure that we can speak to them in a way, obviously that doesn't offend people, but also helps them to realize the gravity of the situation and why social distancing is so important.
Absolutely. This is a tough one. I think it is so important that we get this message across. And there are many people working to try and figure out how best to convey that message to the different groups. In terms of speaking to kids, let's work our way up. In terms of talking to kids, I think the most basic way that we can describe how we can all work together and why it's important is just in terms of washing hands and taking care of people who might not otherwise be able to protect themselves, right? So they're used to washing hands at school, and that's just something we all do, and so that group is sort of more on the basic level. Then the teens, the problem that we're finding with working with the teen population is that they're not as at risk as others unless they have compromised immune systems or health issues. So they're sort of feeling like, well, we can just live life the way that we always have, and it's not going to matter because the more complicated thing with teens is that they are already, in terms of their development and the development of their brain, in a more nothing can happen to me kind of phase of life. So they're already a little more risk taking than they would otherwise. So we're just trying to really drill the message home that it's their job as like more of a social responsibility to be self-isolating in order to maybe not protect themselves, but to protect others. And there are a few different graphics that I've seen on different articles, as well as different cartoons that sort of kind of portray this for teens to show that it's not about them, it's about the greater good. And I think it is a hard thing to convey, and so people are working to, I've seen more and more come out over the last few weeks to sort of depict this in a very clear way for them. And then, I've spoken with some of the older generations in terms of, I think there's been a bit of not wanting to accept the vulnerability that they are the ones that we're trying to protect. And it sort of, feels like, well, I'm not in that group. And I've had like very honest conversations with people saying this is the age group and you actually do fall into that. And that's a hard thing with, just grappling with getting older and their own phases of life that we sort of have to adjust to in a normal out of the coronavirus era. It's hard to accept, aging into different categories. And so I think that for them to hear that, well, they're the group that we're talking about, has been a hard thing. And I think that takes, it's from many people that I've spoken to, it's taken a lot of conversations with younger people saying that we really want to protect you, like we're worried about you. And I think that that's really hard to hear.
Another question that Joy had, she lives alone with her cat, and she did the, video call during Passover with her family, but it really leaves a lot to be desired in terms of relationships and building relationships or having relationships with her family. So can you speak to some other tips for, as someone who's living alone, ways that they can find ways to connect during this time with other people, and even 6 feet apart, doing walks with other people 6 feet apart or things like that?
Yeah, I know it is such a hard time to be alone, and the days are long, and then the weeks get longer. And it's nice to see loved ones via video, and then they still feel so far away, and sometimes that can even be harder. I think that people are sort of trying to find new ways and different ways to connect. I've heard more people writing actual handwritten letters to each other, and sort of sending them in the mail and then looking forward to receiving them back as a way of staying in touch. I've heard some people that are keeping journals for either their grandchildren, not necessarily about this time, but just about reflecting on their own life that they wouldn't have otherwise had the time to do. But with the feeling of connectivity as they're writing it, there's many different sort of, doesn't speak exactly to this particular example, but there are a lot of like chain letters going. I feel like people are trying to reach out in any way. There's recipe chain letters that are going through families, and things that we haven't done in many, many years. And people are sort of trying to find new ways like that to connect.
Great. And also, I think that you had said the other day, maybe doing, the video chats aren't great, but, scheduling regular ones with good friends is something to look forward to on a weekly or a daily basis as a way to connect with people.
Yeah, I think that goes into sort of our routine and our schedule too, right? I think that to have that sort of marker of time and knowing that, I'm looking forward to speaking to this person and they're going to be part of my routine, it adds, a social aspect to our routines that might not otherwise be there, which I think is a fabulous thing to do.
So I just want to thank everyone for being here today. I know there's a few callers who joined last minute. Again, this is Grace Lee, and we have Dr. Michelle Crimins on the line. If anyone on the phone would like to ask a question, just dial *9 and we can go ahead and connect you. And Josh, if there's anyone, we'll give them a minute in case anyone wants to ask a question. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for questions on the phone, Richard Corman is asking to the group, there's a large self-organized volunteer group in New York City that's providing free mental health support to essential workers, especially those in healthcare. It says that they have more than 2,000 caregivers ready to provide phone-based support to people in need. It's called nyccovidcare.org. Do you have any thoughts on how to validate a group like this and how to know whether they're a trustworthy group of professionals?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I honestly am not sure. I wouldn't be able to say based on
I mean, what are the typical markers, I guess, for how you would, verify whether a therapist is somewhat, a trustworthy therapist? Or how do you build a relationship with a therapist for someone who's seeking it for the first time?
So I think that one thing I always tell people is that just because somebody's coming to you as being an expert in something or the professional in whatever, it doesn't mean that they're going to be the right person for you. First of all, because it's a relationship like in a therapy environment is it's very unique and very it's personal. It's a personal relationship and it has to feel like the right fit. So I often recommend that you talk with several people sort of to get, if you have the opportunity. I don't know in this kind of situation if you're assigned to someone or how much say you have in who you're working with, but if you have the opportunity to talk to 2 or 3 people and kind of feel in your gut who feels like the right fit for you, if there's ever even the slightest red flag of I don't really like how that person responded, you should really trust yourself, because in order to feel supported and feel understood, you have to feel confident that this person is hearing you and responding to you appropriately. So I don't ever want anyone to just defer to the fact that, oh, it's a therapist, they know what they're doing. That's not always the case, unfortunately. And so you really do need to trust your gut. And that might feel like something you can figure out in one session. It might be on the third, or you're questioning it. If at any point you think, I don't know if this is right for me, there are many other therapists out there that can and will be willing to help you. And once you find that right fit, you'll know. You wouldn't be questioning it any further.
Yeah, I love that question a lot, because I think during this time there will be people who are exploring therapy for the first time. And, it's important that people seek help when they need it, and to make sure that they can get the right support that they need, and not to feel intimidated by the process, or intimidated because on the first try, they didn't find the person that they really felt connected with. So I think that's good. That's a really great advice, to continue to keep trying until you find someone who you can connect with. So we have a question on the line from Carol. Carol, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, this is Carol Seidelman. How are you? Yes, because I was trying to get into this system, and it was not so easy on my phone. I missed a little. So I was wondering, and it might be good for you, if you could summarize the first 15 minutes that I missed.
Hi, Carol. Thanks for your question. So let's see, Grace, which part should we highlight and summarize? Oh, Grace, are you muted?
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, we can speak really quickly to finding connection. Well, I mean, I think we talked about connection during social distancing a little bit. Managing relationships with partners in small spaces. We can speak to that. And Carol, Josh can connect with you offline about some of the other notes we have from the call. This is recorded as well. And so we'll have the opportunity to share it with you afterwards.
So just to sort of recap on how to manage relationships during this time when we're so far apart, and how to keep connections that we have and even make new connections if we can. I think it's super important to kind of, for our own mental health, to relieve our own anxiety, to keep life as normal as can be during this crazy time that we're all in. It is important to connect in many different ways. So whether that might be just the way we're doing today all together, it's so nice to connect with you all, and finding ways. There's new resources every day coming out for ways to either get into live activities, video streaming activities, and otherwise on the internet with people that you might not know. And then, as we were just speaking about, kind of reconnecting with old friends, reconnecting with family that we might not otherwise be connecting with, talking with people. It feels lately like people who are very close by geographically feel just as far away as people who are across the world. And so it's sort of an odd situation to be connecting with people from all phases of life, if you wish, because sort of everybody's in that mentality and equally feeling isolated. So I've noticed more and more connections of people who have always been available to speak to, but there's never been that sort of pressing desire as there is now to be universally connecting in any way possible.
Thanks for that, Michelle. And I just wanted to let everyone know that in the Zoom group chat, you can go to you can enter in the 2, and there's a drop down. If you can put in Joshua Murillo, he can, and if you're interested in getting more resources, we're going to put together a resources page that we can send out to everyone with the different mental health resources across New York City. So Josh can go ahead and collect your email, and we can send that to you directly. So for the many of you who are participating right now, if you want to go ahead and type a message to Josh, you can go ahead and share your email, and we'll send that off to you. And if you're on our email list already, obviously you will be able to send that out. Yeah. So does anyone have? It looks like we've kind of exhausted many of the questions in the chat now. Just wanted to any other specific things, Michelle, that you think that we should are important to share during this time, and the idea that we could be social distancing for another month or more.
I know I think that's a really good point. We talked about this the other day when we spoke, just in terms of the uncertainty of it all, right? The more and more people I speak with, we realize that we're planners. We're planners by nature. It helps us feel like we're in control of things. And during this time, we don't know how long this is going to be going on. And that can feel scary. So I think that it's a time where we are trying to be in control in any small ways that we can. And that's an important thing to do. That's sort of what helps keep us feeling like we can do this. We can, we can make it another month or 2 if we need to. So I think that there's a balance between being generous to ourselves and knowing that we can't do it all, And then also kind of like realizing where we can exert some control in our lives and when it's feeling harder and harder to do that. But I also think that for people who are relatively safe and healthy, you know, I'm not speaking to the people who are dealing with illnesses or who are on the front lines, but if we're feeling safe and healthy, it's sort of an interesting time to like be introspective and notice things about ourselves. Notice what is our go-to habit for comfort that is good and not so good, and things we talked about earlier. How can we sort of redirect? Maybe now's the time to change some bad habits that we have. And I also find that in times of discomfort, when we're sort of out of our comfort zone, that's when growth can happen. So, you know, we do know that this will end one day. We need that reassurance for ourselves and for our families, of course. And so with that knowledge that this will pass at some point, and hopefully we are all healthy and safe on the other side of it, in what ways can we have grown from it? And what ways can we have made difficult relationships within the home stronger? Does that mean communicating a little bit more, taking a little bit more risks when like a lot of us are conflict avoidant, and communicating is tricky. So how can we sort of, you know, gently and with humor sometimes, and you know, in the best way we can, grow from this difficult experience?
And Michelle, I have one more question for you and I don't mean to end on a serious note, but or a heavier note, but there is a possibility that some of us may lose someone or have already lost someone close to us due to the virus. And again, being alone, kind of coping with those feelings of loss. Can you speak to that a little bit? How we can do that at a distance from other people?
Yeah, I think this is the hardest one. It's absolutely heartbreaking that right now, when loved ones are lost, that we can't be together. And this is sort of an unprecedented thing to have to figure out and experience. It's just by nature, of course, we want to be with loved ones and help each other grieve and support them. And I think that this might be the hardest piece of this, to not physically be able to do that in a time when we need it so much. It's really a time to rely as much as we can on whatever support systems we have, and hopefully, if it's tricky to figure out what that support system is for you, then that sort of should be like tier 1 of self-care that we were talking about earlier, because whether we're in each other's physical presence or not, we really do need to support one another to get through this.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. You know, our campaign has changed a lot in the last month, I would say, with social distancing, and it's really important for us to provide resources to the entire district that are helpful and can help us all get through this time together, and also to remind everyone of the great relationships that we have built up to this point, and that we're stronger as a community. So we will be doing these town halls every week on Sundays at 4 p.m. We would love if you can share with your friends and your neighbors that we're doing these town halls. They'll be on different topics. Next week, we'd like to do one on the economy to talk about resources when it comes to from small businesses to employment to what's going on in the state budget. And so if anyone's interested in that, we'd love to have you tune in. And if you have any other topics that you are interested in learning more about, feel free to email me. It's grace@graceleeforassembly.com, or our team at info@graceleeforassembly.com, or go ahead and drop topics into the chat, and we'll get experts to talk with us more. So thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Michelle, for your time today. I think we all learned a lot from it. It was very therapeutic. I feel like I just had a nice therapy session about all the emotions that we've been feeling through this crisis, and feel good that we can get through it together.
Thank you so much for having me, Grace. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Be well.